Thanks, Martin. Guys, moving to the some interesting conversation now. Can I have Sanjay? Sanjay, you're there. So
yeah, hi.
Can we have Sanjay and myself both on the screen, please?
Hello, everyone, and very good afternoon. And are we on from the host?
Yes, Sanjay, very well, very much.
Great. Yeah,
can
thanks.
See you and hear you well. And I think just before I pass it on to you, I think there has been a very interesting conversation since yesterday. As you know, you can see we started with the boundaryless finance and the CFO dialogues and so on and so forth. In fact, just to share with you, Sanjay, and I know you and I spoke just a couple of hours before the session, and there was a bit of a surprise to both of us, and that's a surprise we brought in because till yesterday evening, this session, the fireside chat of two of us talking, was supposed to be on an interesting topic. We were contemplating on finance in a box and looking at new operating models or new age operating models and so on and so forth. And after listening through the sessions yesterday, we said it can't be in the box. Let's open this box, and that's where we changed the entire topic itself. And we made the topic as pivoting from being a function to business, because that's the kind of conversation we were having it yesterday. So I know it's going to be interesting, and we'll be building our thoughts together on this topic. But over to you, Sanjay, for some quick initial thoughts from you.
Yeah, thanks, Rakesh. You're absolutely right. The initial design of the session was to be put into a box to sort of parameterize the function and to create some kind of a roadmap, a benchmark, etc. However, after hearing some of the speakers having a very broad view of finance as a function, we were forced to acknowledge the fact that maybe we were far too tight with our thought process, and we need to liberalize it a little more. Ravi started it by saying boundary less and stepping across boundaries and stuff like that. We realized that boxing it is not at all possible. And so, in fact, we were intending to create an environment where finance is to become the catalyst, so to say, where it becomes a pivot, like we were very rightly used, and make the organization prosper. And finance itself has to grow to be able to do that. So we must have this conversation. Another very simple point that I want to make to the people who are attending this program is we don't have any structured presentations, at least not after the conversation we had yesterday. We have some thoughts, and that's why this is called a fireside chat, because Rakesh and I will deliberate on a couple of things. Something will come out of it. We don't know what the end result will be, but this is how we work at Shared Services Forum, creating all our material. In any case, we work like this. We don't start with anything but ideas in our mind, and we begin to deliberate with each other, contradict each other, then support each other, and finally come out with some kind of a rudimentary format, and then sort of develop it further by adding experiential stories to it, etc., etc. And so this is what we're going to be talking about. Now, a 30-second on the two presentations that were just made by Martin and Sushil. I think they were phenomenal, both of them, because one, Martin really talked about data and the fact that we lose sight of some of the very important aspects of data while we keep talking about digitization and digitalization. Secondly, Sushil obviously blew us all away by creating that virtual reality impact, by taking us into his steel plants and into his storage plants and the smelting units and the various high profile units. As a commoner, no one will ever get to see any of it, so the experience was really phenomenal. Finance has moved that needle. Finance has initiated that needle, and finance is therefore not necessarily bound by anything. The user experiences right now may be limited to the investor, But what stops me? I'm not an investor in Tata Steel, but after having heard what Sushil said, what stops me from logging on to the Tata Steel website and gaining that experience on a first-hand almost basis? I've never seen inside of a steel plant, but I can get that experience and the thrill that goes with it. So this is a very simplistic model on how finance can actually become, so much of a partner of the business, that where the finance is and where business is sort of blurs a little bit. So I was thinking, when we talk about finance, we usually limit ourselves. And my sense is that finance actually comes through under, four formats, so to say, Rakesh. The first format is really the simplistic people. For example, I'm a finance professional. Technically, I've been a finance guy all my life in the initial years doing finance work. And therefore, finance professionals make the first level of people of finance, so to say. Whenever we talk about finance, the people therein obviously become the first level of reference when we talk about them. And then we come to the finance teams, the people who make these verticals, the specialities, the guys who are in the reporting group, for example, and the guys who are in the FP&A group, or the ones who are doing the R2R work, AR work, all that kind of stuff. So these are verticals, or silos at times. In fact, we will talk about silos, because that's one of the features also of coming into a business. Then we have finance as a function, a total finance as a function, finance the functional stream. So that's the one function that you talk about, finance, as opposed to technically other business support services. And finally, we come to finance as a stream of thought, and it flows through the entire organization, with every individual and every function in the organization being a representative of finance in some way, because every person in the organization needs to have financial acumen, commercial acumen, business acumen, and the finesse of how the business is run, and how finance matters in every aspect. So whenever we talk of finance, these four levels and layers that I think about, and saying, when we talk about finance, is it an individual? Is it a function? Is it the entire function as a whole, or are we talking about the entire organization, which is sort of financial? And let's go through the contours, Rakesh, and then maybe between you and I, we can get some sense about how we can design something to sort of pivot finance from being just a mere function, which is the most common thought, into it becoming a business. What's your view?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I think, Sanjay, I think a couple of things which I was just trying to converge, if I have to say, basis the discussion so far. I think one of the major pieces which is coming out very clearly is that the the organizations have to start, or the finance has to start thinking just beyond finance as a function, and start looking at and connecting with the business, or be the business, if I can say, the way the IT has done it, and IT has become the business. I think that's the way they have to do it, and I think that is where there's a lot of expectation. I think even the conversation around data and the information. I think even Upendra was talking in the earlier discussion, or some of the panelists were talking about the insight, the information and insights. I think it's very important to look at the overall decision making, that informed business decisions is going to be very, very important, or even looking at implementing new strategies, or really steering some new innovations. I think you can't just be waiting for somebody else will do the innovations, and you are just sitting on the periphery and say, well, I'll support you, right? So really steer some of these innovations is going to be an important dimension, as I feel, as a part of the finance. They need to be strategically alert. They need to be taking advantage of any opportunities coming forward. do a dynamic resource allocation, if I can say, or relook at the resourcing and not the traditional way of hierarchical structure, will allow them to really function well. So I think they have to be, as I used the word yesterday, they have to be a juggler par excellence. They have to be just dealing with multiple things. At a cash at one time, an investment at one time, and a business at one time, a decision which is important to be taken, and so on and so forth. So I think some of these will be important.
And one of the things that Rakesh, that continue to not be understood largely, and one, including me, I struggled a little bit, is to recognize the non-tangible or the not so very clear facts about the business, etc. Because most often finance only talks about the tangibles or the most visible elements in a business, but finance teams, leadership need to recognize the intangibles as well, and not just recognize them, they must be able to incorporate all the intangible drivers of value of an organization for the organization in its business plans, and synthesize that data, that information, the non-visible drivers, etc., to realize value for the larger organization. So I think the intangibles play a very important role as well.
Absolutely, Sanjay, absolutely. And I think the another dimension also came out, and very beautifully though in the last few interactions, I can see is that, the past is past, which is historical data is important, but the whole shift has to happen from the historical data to the forward-looking analysis. That lag indicators to the lead indicators, and how to look at new business opportunities, how to really execute some of those decisions are going to be very, very important, as well as a part of the entire change or a movement of the finance. I think one thing which as I was talking with you, what I've done is I have requested the host to capture some of the thoughts which we are discussing, and maybe just put something at the end of our discussion by saying these are some of the convergence or culmination of our conversation, so that it becomes meaningful. And one of the ideas which I'm having, Sanjay, is that, and I'd like to share with you that, given the multiple perspective which we heard in the sessions, I feel this is, and this is also one of the trigger points which we had as when we were deliberating about the theme for this event, the unlocking value through this whole digital leapfrogging and new operating model in finance. We were saying that how that shift has to happen, right? It's all about leapfrogging, and it's just not digital leapfrogging. So I think one of the ideas which I'm having is how to really do this pivoting of the finance from a function to a business. That itself could be something like a framework which could become, and we can evolve something, as we keep talking just now, can we evolve something into some framework which can become a reference guide for the leaders who have joined in, and they can take it back and apply in their context.
Sure. You're quite an established leader in the framework creation world, Rakesh. There have been many that you have actually created and operated. Absolutely. So we must certainly talk about some framework, because at least the structure of a framework can be created now, depending on the so many notes that we've all got about
yes. I was looking at my notes as well.
Yeah.
So do I. I was looking at my notes as well, and I was trying to put it. But I think you're putting it back on me, this idea that we should have a framework, and putting me in a spot to start thinking right away. So I think as you were speaking, and I was thinking of this whole pivoting, and we can look at this, this word pivot itself, and say, can we have pivot as the word which can be converted into an acronym as the framework, and let's see how we can connect the dots back to this whole as a pivot, as a framework.
No, absolutely. Very appropriate term also. Very appropriate term, Rakesh.
Pivoting, right? We're talking about pivoting. So I'm saying I'm just trying to put a PIVOT and trying to put some of the notes back into it and saying, okay, what does this PIVOT could mean in terms of pivoting? So I think the P I can take, Sanjay, and maybe I'll let you take few things. And I'm just thinking, I'm trying to figure out what all the themes which we're talking about. So we are of course talking about business process. We're talking about I could be information. I don't know, it can't be virtual reality, but something else. We have to think about it.
How much you'd like it to be virtual reality, but
So to put something, O
maybe
is O is operating model
versatility.
structure. Yeah, O is V is versatility is very good. I think V is a versatility, and that is what is required. I think, and we'll talk about it. O is operating model, so operating structure and model very
Yeah.
clearly. So operating structure and model. T is no too much of transformation, but I think it's more than transformation. Being a transformation catalyst or transformation agent, somebody who just drives the transformation agent. So I just park it like transformation agents here,
Yeah, transformation
and
agent.
then we'll come back.
The
I I was
transformation can actually have innovation maybe also as a part of it, because they are agents for innovation as well.
right. Good
So
point. And I was
could
thinking
be
about I. So how do you connect that I? Because I was thinking information and innovation. Now you're saying transformation and innovation is T. Then
actually information and insights might be better.
oh, okay, that's
So
better.
because it's innovation is more from a transformation point of view. I mean, they're cousins, transformations and innovation. So they can sort of live together. But I think
Right.
from an information point of view, information gets converted to insights, no, really. So, information and insights can probably be clubbed together under I or something, you know.
Right,
So
right.
maybe that
I,
is what.
I we have some thoughts. We'll have to maybe, so as we said, versatility. I think the versatility has to be. I'm just looking at. I was
Flexibility,
talking
no.
about. So something like juggler par excellence, which I keep talking about, is a versatility, isn't it?
Yeah,
It comes,
absolutely.
yeah. So that's very important, and we'll bring it versatility there.
To be able to control so many balls in the air at the same time and not allow even one of them to fall down. What else can you be actually?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. Phenomenal.
And I think the P could be performance, but I think information insights is performance. So in a way, so P is okay. So P could be interesting one to the process. So I will say P is process. Now the
Process
challenge
to
is not
business, no? At the end of the day, it is process to business. You have to move.
no, but there's an interesting challenge, Sanjay, here. You'll see it, and I think who better than me, I can agree to you the process to business. The one of the challenge which we are seeing on the process to business, and I keep talking about it, that this term business process we all use, but I can tell you last 20 years we have spent so much of time on the process that everything has become so much process that the B of the BP has been lost. So people don't focus on business at all. So it has become
Yeah.
very process. So business process is business process. So the process has to connect back to the business, and finance is a great opportunity to really connect that, because they deal with multi-functions. You talk about purchase to pay, they talk about procurement, they talk about marketing, the supply chain, productions, the materials management. Every nook and corner of the organization or enterprise is connected. So I see this process to business is a very important thing, and it also needs to have that ability to break the silos.
No, I agree.
It's
So
not just
actually,
working like a silo.
so maybe it's process focus, which is sometimes very restricted thinking that finance has, to business focus. I mean, like you very rightly said, connecting, throughout the organization and linking every unit of the organization all together. That's business focus. No, do not necessarily have a myopic view of process. This is my process. This is how financial process works and stuff like that, etc. But to have an entire continuity of the business, even if it means cutting across the various functions. In fact, it should be cutting across the various functions and breaking the silos, which is, like for 10 years where you've been using the same term, breaking the silos. But this is exactly what is required even now. It's very relevant.
No, I think this is. So I'm just trying to put that pivot back into the whatever we have discussed so far, and then now we can start refining it. And I'm hoping the backend team and the host is able to capture some of the interesting conversation, because we are going with the flow, but we want somebody to help us to do that. So that is very important. Uh, so as whatever scribbled just now as a pivot as a term, we are saying, and let's see it, is it comprehensive or not, Sanjay? Something which I'm missing it here. So I'm reading it out as what I've captured. So we have said PIVOT, and P is process focus to business focus, and which breaks the silos and cuts across the function in a way.
Absolutely. Process focus to business focus. Now, business focus actually means cutting across the various organizational boundaries that you may have. By the way, this may include not limited to the legal entities, because you have to take the entire ecosystem into place. And it can't be just limited to the corporate entity and say that, so for example, the entire ecosystem of supply chain management, customer experience, like, we spoke a lot about customer experience. Finance can't brush it hands off and say, customer is not my property and therefore I have nothing to do. All of that kind. So it has to be across the entire ecosystem.
Right. So I think there's a P. We are very clear, and I think it's a very, very important dimension we must have as a part of pivoting. So I'll say P is very clear. We can always further add more to it. I think
one more element to this. I may want one more element before we move on. I think which is also very important to measure and to keep track of. So like the 4 levels of finance I talked about, where finance has to be included, is the DNA of every individual and every function of the organization. That maybe finance acumen and business acumen, you may want to call it like that. Finance acumen, commercial acumen, business acumen, it has to be infused as the DNA of the elements of the organization, individual or functional. That I think is an important. And I think maybe finance team here has to take that ownership of infusing that. So it's sort of encouraging it and propagating it, so to say.
And it's a both way streams in a way, Sanjay. Like, it's a financial acumen to the business, so that finance teams takes the ownership. Similarly, the finance team also, as we're talking about process focus to business focus, they need to have business acumen.
Fair point.
So as a part of their DNA. So they also need to take ownership of having that business DNA, business acumen as a part of their DNA is also important. So
absolutely. Finance and business, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a double way stream. So process focus to business focus and cutting across functions is one element, I'll say. The second is, we said and you said information and insights. And I look at insights, again, this is an interesting one. I think in the first panel, the CFO panel, we talked about, and I think it's applicable to all the members of the finance team. It's each one of us can play a role here. Usually it is very clear we are, as a finance professional, custodian of compliances. We are the custodians of information as well, right? But information for compliances. The limitation is sometimes it is information for compliances, information as a reporting for performance. While I feel that they have to also become a custodian of performance, that encouraging delivering business impact is also because the maximum insights are available here. What kind of decisioning in terms of which business to keep, which business to drop, etc., etc. So as we're talking about making informed business decisions, has to come from this information and insights, and not just about providing insights, but taking informed.
You're right, absolutely. It not only has to provide insights, but it has to be able to enable decisions or drive decisions, and those decisions must have a business impact. That's also very important, because it's not just it's like input, output, outcome. That linkage must be provided, like information, data and information, insights, they still remain inputs. At the minute it becomes output, could be a decision that you have taken, a business decision but it must have a business impact, that is an outcome. So I think that continuity and that linkage is very important from a
And for example, we talked about, and I think I was in the beginning as this, I was talking even yesterday, I talked about is moving from this lag indicators to lead indicators.
Yeah,
Also a
absolutely.
very important element of this information and insights. I think there are many examples where people are saying this, the point of move away from this annual budgeting, sometimes because when you're trying to look at the disruptions and, some of the business impact, because annual budgeting process is many times focuses on incremental growth strategies, right? While there's a conversation about dynamic funding and dynamic execution on some of these areas, I think that also is in a way, like again connecting back to the point of, uh, and this could be even connected with the next one, the V and I innovate. It's a cusp of both. The cost of not taking decisions, the versatility, but it has to be based on the information and insights. So there's a connect which very much establishes there. That's the way I look at it.
So dynamic funding, for example, that you just mentioned, is a great point, Rakesh, because up till now, for example, I'll just give an example that budgeting exercises, etc., used to be at one time, annual. Even companies used to prepare those 5-year plans, etc., etc. But I think now it's a very dynamic world, and it's the need of the hour, so to say, if you was to use that term, where dynamism is an important. It's real time. So you need all these things to be real time. You cannot have them periodic, and certainly not annual. Annual is like we've seen in the last 1.5 years, the world has gone through such major changes that anything that you may have planned in 2020 is all washed out within the same year itself already.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Dynamic is a very good term.
So I think so. The second one we are saying is information and insights, and this should enable, actually not enable, even it's a driving the decisions. See, enabling always we have finance have been doing for ages now. So I think it's also about driving the decisions and delivering business impact. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So it is, so information and insights to drive decisions and deliver business impact. That's the way I look at it.
And the drive is an important word, because enable can means you can sit outside and enable it. But drive is right there. Absolutely right.
Yeah, because enabling though we have been doing for 20 years now. So what new?
Absolutely.
So P and I, we have, and I'll put it back again, but I think the V is what we said versatility, and this whole juggle par excellence, if I had to say juggle par excellence. So versatility, right? So I think again there's a lot of discussion happened. I think Nitin also talked about that there needs to be a skill team. There needs to be the traditional hierarchical models will not work. You need to have the right kind of team. I think even just now Martin was talking about that capability investments in the right kind of a resourcing is very important. So bringing that multi-skilled, digitally skilled, multiple structuring of the team. So that gig economy and all we keep talking about. So the temps resources, the gig resources, etc. There could be multiple ways you can structure the team. But what is important is to make sure that you have that versatile team, and it is not the typical traditional hierarchical structure. So you need to have the network team, and this is something just coming out from the practitioners. They were just sharing today, so it is not something theoretical. Very much they were talking about how they have used it.
You have to use the word dynamic here also, Rakesh, because it has to be a dynamic kind of a chessboarding, or dynamic resource allocation, if you may, if you want, kind of a instant move. So going with what you just said, hierarchical is structured, which is fixed, it's rigid in a way, and therefore dynamic resource allocation is an important feature, because you should be able to switch, change thoughts, ideas, capabilities very rapidly. Also goes in favor of defining an agile finance, for example, we said. So it's very important that your versatility is visible. That could be another one.
So process focus to business focus, information and insights drive decisions and business impact, then versatile, and then we're also talking about being special. So versatility and speciality. With
Yeah,
that,
yeah, it's yeah,
yeah.
special.
So because we talked about that that skills, so it is uh, they need to be having that skills and versatility both in a way, if I can use that. So versatility and speciality, and the
Yeah,
same point of time being a great juggler. So juggle par excellence. They should be able
yeah,
to juggle par excellence
yeah.
is very very important.
That's why we have, things like gig workers. When we say talk about gig workers, that's exactly what we mean, or specialists, or
Mm.
part timers, because you sort of bring in the required talent if required, or whatever else skill you require, competency required, on a momentary or on a need basis, so to say. So, as a service use, as a service. So
Mm.
there could be a
Yeah.
lot, uh, there could be several things like this, like, employment as a service. Need not
I
even
would
be full time.
I'm just trying to be from the time point of view. I'm just thinking that there's a two more letters, and we want to make sure that it's comprehensive, the entire pivot, so that if we need to fill in something, we can put something somewhere.
Yeah,
Like
otherwise,
O is, I was saying, operating model. So, and I like and this is something which, as an SSF, we have been saying for maybe 9, 10 years now. And I was very happy to hear even Sushil using the word, the best in class to best in context, right? So the entire operating model, the operating structure has to be contextual, right? Because what has worked for say ABB may not work for say Tata Autocom, or may not work for Wellspun. What has worked for Insan Coca-Cola beverages may not work for Inco, or may not work for Atkins. So it is all very contextual, based on the
yeah.
maturity and the growth journey of the organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was just going to add that, I'm saying that contextual, because contextual, assign it to something. So you're right. It's contextual to where you are now and where you want to be. So, it's what is the level of maturity that an organization already currently has. So it's like, how mature are the processes and how mature is the thinking, and also the growth story or the growth journey, where you want to go, how you want to go. So yeah, absolutely right. Structures have to be contextual. Contextual.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
Now, this is where I was saying there are something which has to be like we talk about shared services, but again, the shape of the shared services has to be again contextual, right? And there are multiple forms of the shared services which we can see here. I mean, gone are the days when there only one choices was available. Like you can do a pure play outsourcing, you can do only a pure play captive. So there are so many hybrid models and so on and so forth. We ourselves are trying to evolve many. So I feel that the shape of the shared services, and I think another thing which I think again Nitin was talking very well was what to be in the shared services. That question also has changed. Earlier, when we used to talk about too much of this transactional processes, repetitive process in the shared services, I think that also is going through its own change. And I feel that is very important from the operating model. That is kept in the mind, even from driving that digital strategy as well, from the operating structure or operating model, because there's a lot of, and this is one area I think, of course, Sushil was and Martin made a very different kind of an impact, but still we feel that people are still talking about driving efficiency gains through digital or technology in the uh, transactional
Yeah,
processes.
yeah,
If I
basic
about
processes.
basic
Absolutely,
processes,
absolutely. Yeah,
AP, AR, GL, we're still talking like that, right? We have
yeah,
deployed some bots. We're still talking about RPAs, etc. While there's a huge opportunity lying in the some high-end processes, and we have seen it, like in case of budgeting and forecasting, the investments, the capital allocations, the audit processes. There are many of these processes where you can really bring the digital, which is basically the intelligence. See, the where I think we need to move away. My sense in the operating model here, Sanjay, is might be the organization will have to move away from a typical I mean, okay, let me put the point differently. Maybe I'm just trying to thinking through and bring it to perspective. Saying it's a coexistence of automation, it's a coexistence of not human, but a human intelligence, not the processors. And it's also a coexistence of digital capabilities, which is much higher the order. It is just not about saying I have digitized some of the processes. You have to start putting into these three buckets by saying how much of human intelligence we have, and their intelligence. They're not, it's not about number of FTs. They're not just about human bodies. It's about intelligence. Right? Then there's an automation. So whatever is not intelligence is automated. Okay. Now, whatever requires further intelligence, but requires a strong kind or specific kind of a capability, that is digital capability. You have to start. That's where I think that's like, for example, so she was talking about VR. I think you have to look at these three together.
Very good, very good. No, capsule. And it's also about collaboration, Rakesh, because there are so many different providers now. Bots, for example, were being talked about a big time. The previous panel talked a lot about bots, etc. And there is human intelligence. You just use this term, human intelligence. Now the point is that these various resources, if I can call them very loosely, they need to have a very strong, effective, coordinated collaboration kind of a program. And this collaboration is as important as having them, individually together. And, things happen here, and so flexibility. So collaboration, flexibility. What other features? Virtual, for example. I mean, there are many of these are virtual. People have been virtual for a year and a half now. The bots have been pretty much virtual throughout, and empowered. People are now seriously empowered. All those, those kind of defined transaction level controls, etc., have all moved. So, empowerment has become a very important part of the operating model of an organization now, especially in new times, post-pandemic times, so to say.
Yeah. So that's, I think, it's covered the operating model and structure, and we talked about the contextuality to the maturity and the growth journey of the organization where they stand. So I think that's a way to look at O. And O also talks about the shape of the shared services. It also talks about the way the coexistence has to happen, as we talked about, the collaborations we talked about. So that's a way. It's a comprehensive one. It is not about the structure. It is not about the way the shared services needs to be there. It's about much beyond that. That's a way we look at operating model, pretty much. And we also saying efficiency gains not limited only to transactional processes, but going beyond that.
Going beyond that.
The T is where we'll have to see the difference is not. I think you said you added the word innovation to transformation. I think along with transformation, and I think I was saying the catalyst or they being the agents. I think this is where sometimes the problem I have with this word transformations, because transformation is now used for anything you do. You say I'm doing transformation. So that's the biggest challenge. So
Rakesh,
I would have not preferred to use the word transformation here, something else. But
I know it's a misused word, or much used word, not misused necessarily, but it's a much used word. But transformation is transformational. I mean, we used to talk about change, moving on to transformation, moving on to metamorphosis. But I think transformation is important because metamorphosis changes form, and that's important in its own context. I'm not denying it at all. We've written a lot about metamorphosis.
Yes.
But transformation makes a good term here, because that's what you don't want to change the entire thing and say, okay, I'm going to close this company and run a new one. That's not happening. No? Or I'm to change this business entirely. You have to keep the very business, but change the way you work on it. And continue to keep changing and thinking about it, etc., which is transformation, really. I think the term transformation is important, and transformation linked with innovation. There are newer ways to think, newer ways to.
This is where I will
business.
Yeah, this is where I'll pick a very good point which Sushil made just a while back was on the customer experience. That how you one side focus on optimizing your operational efficiencies, which is good to have, and you must not good to have. It is absolutely given. That's the way you have to look at it. But it can't be at the cost of customer experience. So the customer experience, we have to look at how we are optimizing the operational efficiencies. But at the same time, how are we maximizing the
Yeah,
customer
yeah,
experience?
absolutely,
That's the way
absolutely.
it has to be kept in the mind. If it is
Correct,
not
correct, correct.
correlated, then it may happen that you have got a lot of operational efficiencies, but customers are absolutely upset about it. I think that's a the transformation has to be also looked from that perspective. I feel it is not just about the process improvement. It is just not about the process optimization. It is also about that maximizing the customer experience. I feel
Yeah.
is going to be important.
No, no, another, absolutely right, Rakesh. Another important aspect is that, while finance is primary role, and to a certain extent, a lot of people still think that it's a controllership function. And one of the things that is coming through very, very clearly is that while the controllership function is not being denied, it still continues to remain the control center for the organization. But the control center has moved. The control center should not remain at the operational transactional level anymore. If finance is to become a catalyst to transformation and innovation, the control center must move. The center of gravity for control must move. And therefore, we should not be talking about controls at transactional, operational level, but we should be talking about building controls at the organizational level. At the level of the
See, typically you are saying unified controls, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's true. At the unified level, it has to be. It has to be at the end stage, right? So that to that extent, it's very important because the the color of controllership must change.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's a
think that's another one. I think I was just going back and thinking and looking at my notes. I think Rohit Gupta of Z was making a very good point yesterday. He was saying the digital agenda within the finance function is given as a finance people have to drive it. But even looking at the whole digital agenda and innovation, so the enterprise is also steered by the finance team or the finance leader because they are having the maximum information, understanding behaviors, etc., etc. So steering that innovation and digital agenda, I think, is also one of the things which has to be the part of the pivoting. So the T is also about doing that. Otherwise, still it remains within the function. It has to go beyond the function. If I have to use the
so
word.
true, so true, so true. No, absolutely. I completely agree with you that innovation and innovation. See, I another thing that you may want to talk about. You're talking about innovation, not just necessarily in the form of innovation, but the innovation program of the entire organization, right? Or maybe the entire enterprise. It's the enterprise level that we are talking about, isn't it? I mean, digital agenda, for example, you can't limit it to finance. The digital agenda has to be at the enterprise level, which is what we've been saying that if you are as a finance organization, you are uh, you are the custodian of data and information, then both in transformation and innovation has to be at the level of the enterprise as a whole.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I think we have this scarcity of the time. Otherwise, we can just go on for the hours, typically as we do when we're in office,
This is
and we
far too
spend
much of a short
time
circuit.
till and time till midnight to create and evolve. I think we have got something which we have evolved as a part of this discussion now, and I think I'm very sure we will have to further detail it, Sanjay, and maybe I'll request that if you can crystallize this framework as well as convert into a full article as part of our process edge, so it becomes beneficial for everyone in the industry to see a framework which they can use as a reference guide from really when you're talking about pivoting from being a function to the business, how they should look at it. So I think that's something which we should do, and that is a time when I also urge and request all the industry fellow colleagues to also provide their inputs if they have. I think we have discussed few pointers just now, but as you know, this was in the interest of the time may not be very comprehensive. We tried to start putting it with this term pivoting to pivot, and then we were trying to put something around it. And I think while as I put this pivot, I feel it's quite comprehensive. The one other thing which I also want to talk here is I feel the time has come now, Sanjay. This is the need of the hour, where and I was making the point even in the first panel, the CFO panel yesterday, that you will have to hire science fiction writers, you know, to really visualize the future. So this is what next is the question now. I think like some of the virtual realities and etc. we're talking about, you know, you can have to go to the science fiction writers, and then you start asking them to say, please visualize for us, and then we start looking at it. I think that's another element which is very important as a part of this framework, as we see.
So Rakesh, the closing points, if I may, I know I'm being pushed and you are being pushed for time. So can I request the host to sort of see if the
let me just repeat it. Some of the points we have discussed, Sanjay, so far. I think we spoke about it. You mentioned about something on finance and the 4 levels of the finance, professionals and the streams, etc. I think then we talked about few elements of the pivoting from being a function to the business.
You used pivoting and you created it.
Pivot.
Yeah.
So you asked me to I use the pivot. So I'm just repeating pivot. So if I hope I don't want to push the team at the back end. I think if they have able to capture something, they can put it up on the screen if they have. But I think the P we use for process focus to business focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, process focus, not bad. Yeah. The process focus to business focus.
Cutting across functions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cutting across functions. I is information and insights to drive decisions, correct decisions and deliver business impact. Okay, I think custodian of compliances, etc. were part of the I is what we discussed, right? So some of the custodians of information performance, they're part of the I's. Yeah, and versatility with speciality to juggle. No, not resources.
Not
it's only
necessarily
about, not resources. No, it's not resources.
Not
so
necessarily resources.
Delete the word resources. Yeah, it is not resources.
We'll take it off.
So resources has to be deleted. It's a versatility with speciality to juggle par excellence.
Yeah.
And operating structure and model contextual to maturity and growth journey. Yes, correct. That's what we were saying. And transformation and innovation agents, and of course, science fiction writers. I think.
Yeah, she's also captured your science fiction writers as a part of the bullet, Rakesh. So great.
But that is important, isn't it, Sanjay? That's something which has to be there very much. But I think this pivot has come out. I think this looks very comprehensive. And of course, we'll look at some sub bullets as we discussed. And I think I will provide my scribblings as we were discussing.
I've also taken some notes. Yeah.
Some of the notes, and then we'll try to convert this one pager into maybe 5, 6, 7 pager framework, which becomes little comprehensive. That's what we have always done. I think if we had some couple of more hours, we might have created pivot ka kuch aur bhi bana dete. But I think.
But I want to reiterate this, Rakesh, because
thanks. You can take this off the screen, please. Yeah.
We've had so many people attending it, and I'm hoping that there are people who will give us lots of insights, a lot more insights, etc., for us to be able to create something meaningful and useful. All of those who have thoughts and ideas which we can use, can you just please sort of share with us, write to me, Rakesh, Pallavi, anybody else that you can think about, etc. And we'll be grateful to hear your opinions on pivot, as Rakesh has just coined. So over to you, Rakesh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. And it was lovely 2 days. as
You've
one of
let out a secret today, Rakesh. This is how we create you and I. And
I
you've let
remember.
out. We just, sort of deliberate for hours and hours and hours and just, come out with
Yeah,
things. But yeah, great, absolutely.
no, no, I think, and
Good to you.
but this is the culmination. We use the power of sharing from each one of us, right? And then, so I think the last 2 days we have heard some great insights. They are not theoreticals, right? Whatever we are saying is not academic.
Yeah.
This is pretty much experiential, practitioners' views. They have expressed, every leaders was expressing it, and we have tried to just put it together into one framework. So that's why it becomes an experiential framework and not an academic framework, if I can say. So that's the power of it. But I think where we stand today, it's a time to say bye to each one of you. You all have been a great encouragement to stay put and part of this summit. I know it's raining like cats and dogs outside in Delhi, and I can see it outside from the window here. It's very nice weather outside. So I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and sincere thanks to everyone who have made this event a success, starting with all the speakers who took the efforts to be part of this panel, prepare for the session conversation. The one thing which I liked a lot about the speakers this time was each of these speakers were very passionately willing to share, and they were preparing for it. Nothing was extempore, right? So that was very good in terms of the speaker's point of view. I could experience with all the speakers, connected with pretty much everyone, and that was a great experience. I think some of the questions which landed in the Q&A were very powerful, and that also further added to have the best of the deliberations. So thanks to each of the participants to really have those questions and being very attentive to the last 2 days. I also want to thank the entire organizing team of the Shared Services Forum, very ably led by Pallavi Jaiswal, to put this entire event together in terms of the topic, in terms of the content, in terms of the kind of speakers we need to have, and of course reaching out to each one of you who have joined in to have a great experience. So I think thank you, Pallavi, and thanks the Shared Services Forum team. Pallavi was very well supported by uh, leaders like Sanjeev from the backend technology point of view, or our partners, Muniver Technologies, Naveen, who always ensures some of the backend stuff in terms of registrations, website, etc. Are well taken care of. I take this opportunity to express our gratitude on behalf of the entire Shared Services Forum for enabling us to host this event. Thanks to our event partners, Thomson Reuters, for really supporting us in this event. Thank you, UST, for continuing your trust with the Shared Services Forum and supporting us. I thank Quintus Global, and of course, I take that pride in saying that I represent a couple of organizations personally myself. Of course, Knowledge Partner, R Value Group. So that's about the organizing team, and thanks to the entire ecosystem which was working in terms of the either it could be from a technology backbone like Zoom, or it could be from a website or portals. I think they all have made it really work. With this, I would like to say thank you to each one of you who have continued to be logged in, and see you sometime soon with the next event. I think we are planning to have next couple of events very soon on HR and digital focus and so on and so forth. So look forward to be in touch and see you very soon. Thank you and goodbye, and stay safe. Take care of yourself. Let's follow all the COVID protocols, and let's not have the third wave at all in India. Thank you all. Take care. Bye bye.